Hey guys, Spyro here. So you want to put your computer together and you've never touched a computer component internals ever before. Well, and you don't know where to start. Today I'm going to show you how to completely build one yourself. And I will go over what hardware you need. And this is going to be completely start to finish. Now, this video might sound like it's completely dumbed down, which I'm going to try to dumb it down as much as possible for those that has no idea what they're doing. So if you sort of do, disregard that. This video is maybe for you, maybe help you along the way. Who knows? If it does, good. So with this out of the way, let's get started. First off, you need your computer case. You need your motherboard, which I'll explain why I got two. This motherboard here is no good. This motherboard is going in the computer there. Alright, so disregard that I have two. You need a cooler. Now, some motherboards will have an I/O shield, and some of them don't. Because some of the real high-end, mid-range, even some of the new ones, has the I/O shield built onto the rear I/O of the motherboard. This one here, unfortunately, doesn't, so I will show you how to install the I/O shield if yours comes just like this. You will need, maybe, you might, but it's good to have around, a pair of small pliers, like needle nose. They're not necessary, but you might run into a case where you need these. I'll show you why later. All your cables, your power supply, you need your Phillips screwdriver, more or less all your components completely to build it. You got memory, which I'm going to be taking the RAM out of this one, showing you how to remove the RAM and install RAM, because I'm taking stuff off of this one and putting it over on this one. So you also might need some isopropyl alcohol for me and a cloth. The best thing to use is, if you have them, use coffee filters. Do not use toilet paper, because toilet paper, once it's wet, it disintegrates and it leaves a residue. You do not want to use that. So coffee filter will work beautifully if you have it. Paper towel, like a napkin, will work, but it's not really that recommended. What I've done for my alcohol, because I've done this forever, I've been actually working with computers for a little over 20 years, and I've been doing a heck of a lot of computers. I took my alcohol, I brought this here, and I usually stick it in a squirt bottle. Make things a little bit easier for me so I can do mass amounts of computers. But if it's your first time, do not use a squirt bottle. Use the bottle itself and a coffee filter or napkin. So I'm pretty sure that covers all the tools you're going to need. So let's get started. Okay, first thing what we need to do, grab our case, lay our case down like this, and you might have, okay, side to open. How to tell what side to open is, on most cases, this is like most, you have where your I/O shield goes and your slots for your PCI, PCIe slots, your cards. Got your fan, power supply. You always open the opposite side where your motherboard's at, so this side. So there's two screws, which I already have removed them. Mine was thumb screw type. which goes in there like this. And what I've done is just unscrew it. That's light would help. Unscrew just like this. Then your door, depending on what case you might want to look at, because all cases are different. Mine just slides a little bit off this way, it latches, and it just raises off. Some doesn't do that. Some of them has screws here, screws here, screw here, screw here. Some of them, it's like mine. Some of them's magnetic. Just refer to your manual on how your door comes off. But mine just raises out of the way. Mine's got a fan on the inside, which I can tell you about orientation of fans later, which I also have a video for. Look at my channel to find the fan video for fan orientation. Now on power supply, your power supply goes inside, which you can go ahead and install your power supply if you like. It goes in your case like this. If you got a vent on the bottom, like mine does, your fan, which I don't have because on mine I'll be sticking it on a surface that doesn't get very good airflow down here. So I stuck my power supply upside down. Will not hurt it. But I highly recommend to stick the power supply in the other way. But the fan should be pointed towards this vent so it sucks air from outside, circulates it inside, and goes out. Let's see. So once you get your power supply installed, it goes in the inside. You kind of have to hold it. And there's your 4 screws, which you have just your regular screws, which kind of looks like this here. Small screws. That's where you need your Phillips screwdriver. This is a Phillips head. It's not the flat one. The flat one's looks like a minus when you hold it like this. This one here will look like a cross on the end. It's kind of hard to see on video, but that's how it goes. And you put your 4 screws. You got one here. You got one corner, which would be kind of off diagonal from the other, which is usually by your switch or your plug for your power. And you have 2 on the opposite end. I did not stick my screws all the way in on this one because this computer is just for demonstration purposes and it's not going to be for gaming or anything. It's just going to be something I'm going to slap together and use for a while and go from there. Okay, if you got a modular power supply, please look at your manual and find out where your cables plug into on the power supply, because this is a non-modular power supply, so that all the cables will come pre-attached, which makes things a bit messy and a little bit more difficult to manage. But this case is not going to be for looks or anything like that. It's just going to be for function. This computer here is more going to be for function over fashion. But there's your internals. Now, where we need the pliers, where I said earlier, because some cases might already have them pre-installed, some doesn't. These are called standoffs. You want to make sure you get these in the right spot and they're installed, because if not, your motherboard will be too far in and can short out on the back, because this is metal and you do not want anything on the back of your motherboard. It's this one here. You don't want none of this mess here to contact the back to short out, because that would be very, very bad. So your standoffs takes and puts a tiny bit of spacing between your back of your case and your motherboard. And they look just like this. That's a standoff. They're kind of golden color. Some of them black. But they kind of look like a screw with a hole at the top of it. You'll have a tiny hole at the top, like a cylinder. with the screw head on the, well, the screw end on the other end, so you can screw it in the holes. Okay, now let's see. Now, how to place these, you grab your motherboard, which this one here is the one I'm going to be sticking in here. Lay it down in the inside and line up the holes, which try not to scratch your motherboard. Just lay it in there and just try to line up the holes and your okay, them two line up, them two line up. This one down here in the middle, it lines up. This one down there does not line up, so I'll have to take it and move it up. And this one down there doesn't line up, because if you look behind the motherboard, there isn't any. So that's where you need your pliers, your needle nose, to grab it and turn it, because some of them's kind of tight, to break it loose. Then once it's loose, the light's terrible, you can then unscrew it with your fingers. Oops, whoopsie, dropped it. And move it to where it needs to be. So mine was right here. So we're going to move it to this one. Okay, this one here was, yep, it's tight, so I got to use my pliers. Okay, so, okay, that one there broke loose. Then we need to unscrew this here. Okay. Now this one here goes here. Oops, let's see, right there. They can be a little difficult to put in, but there you go. Get your pair of pliers. Kind of snug it up. You don't have to make them super tight. Just kind of snug it a little bit. Okay. Make sure this one's tight. This one here's tight. That one's tight. This one's tight. Okay. Now, with that completely done, you can install your fans, which I'm going to show on video because mine's already installed. Okay. You want air to come in from the front and either exit through the back. Most cases will have one in the back. Yours better have a fan in the back. Or the top. Okay, so fan orientation does matter. So you do not just want to slap your fan on there. Now, most of your fans will have an arrow on the side of them, which I don't have, which I have a video showing about fan orientation. I have in the video where it shows the arrow, which points always to the direction of the airflow. So you want this one here blowing in. Then you want this one here blowing out, and in either 1, 2, or 3. Some of them might be even more. Some of them might even have 4. They'll blow out. So you want to make sure that matters. You want to also make sure your fan cables, because they come out the side of your fan, you want to make sure they're long enough. For this one here, I just got the fan to where the cable where it'll route behind the motherboard, so it's out of the way, and it plugs in down here to where my power supply's at. Then I got this one here doing the exact same thing. And how you can tell on the fan is you have the little plastic bracket that goes across the motor of the fan. It's always on the side of where the air blows through. So this one here, the bracket is on the other side, so the air will blow out that way. So you see there's no bracket on this side. It's just straight blades. So, well, now let's go to motherboard prep. Okay, when you first get your motherboard, you might have, this is for Intel. AMD's probably a little different. AMD should have on theirs. It'll have a black cover. Comes over top of your CPU socket. You should just pop that off. It's a little black cover. And then these little pins in the inside. They are super, super delicate. Do not And I repeat, do not touch those pins. So that right there, some manufacturers, which MSI, Asus, I know for a fact, if you bend just one of those pins, they will void your warranty and you will not be able to get a replacement motherboard if you damage one of those pins. So be very careful around a socket once you take that cover off. Now, on mine, it's just you have this latching mechanism because you have to flip this up. You pull this back towards this way and it's spring loaded. See? You can see it's kind of springy. Flip this back, and some of them you have to grab this here, and some of them you just push this back and it just raises up for you. Alright, take your seat. Now look close at the socket. Now right here on my socket there is a tab here and a tab there and nowhere else. Make note of where those are. Also on the motherboard there is a mark. I can't recall where it's at. That's a piece of dirt. Let's see. Thinking there is. Mine might not have it. Nope, mine does not have it. But there used to be a mark on one of these. Oh, yeah, right there it is. Right there. Right here, it's that little dot. That is a very handy little dot to make note of. Some of them will actually be on the socket itself somewhere. But this will help you on orientation of the CPU. But that little dot right there, make note. Now what you do on your CPU, because I got to clean mine first because I took my cooler off just for this demonstration, so I got to stop the video. But I'll have to take the video and clean this off. But what I do, I take a little bit of alcohol, my little spray bottle, or do this. I'll show you both ways. Little paper towel, right there. Take it and dissolves the alcohol, the thermal paste right off the CPU. Kind of hard doing it with one hand. Okay. I'll be installing my 4770. It's an older CPU. It's for not a gaming computer, but for a computer totally different. You want to make sure you get all the thermal paste, even off of the, if you possibly can, try to get it off the circuit board if possible. Now, that step that I just showed you, if it's a brand new CPU, you don't have to. Now, one thing on these pins, on the motherboard, well, shoot, on the other side, you do not want to get nothing on these little pads. These little gold pads, which is right, whoops. These little gold pads, you do not want to get nothing on them or damage them in any way, shape, or form. Because if you do damage those, it'd be just like your socket. It will make the CPU where it does not work at all. So you want to make sure that you keep those pads clean and not damage them. Okay, that there. Now, if you're doing the cloth method, take your alcohol and you can take and unscrew this and not spill it. Take your cloth, fold it about, I don't know, about 5 or 6 times. Stick it over top the bottle lid, hold it tight, then just do that, and that'll be just enough alcohol on that to clean your CPU. So that's just how you clean your CPU off if you're planning on thermal pasting it or whatever. You might not even need to do that, but that's just in case you need to. But now my CPU is ready. Now here's a trick. How to get your CPU aligned up to the correct orientation with your socket. Now remember the little dot I told you about? If you look at your CPU, a lot of people does not know this. See the little arrow? Align that arrow up with that dot. And if you look, see the socket? It's got the little tabs. There, right there. It'll line up with that. So just grab your CPU, carry it over, and just drop it right in the socket. Don't press on it, but just kind of grab it by the edge with no pressure down on it and just wiggle it just a tiny bit. Make sure it seats down into the socket, which mine did. See, I cannot. Just tap it a little bit. Just tap it, tap it, tap it, tap. Make sure it sits down in that socket. So mine is perfectly down in that socket. See there? The little tabs there, there. Then just raise this up, down like that. Make sure this goes underneath that little set screw there. Take your little bar, push her down, push it over towards the RAM, underneath, latches. CPU is installed. Now, this is where we need our thermal paste, which your cooler either will come with some pre-installed. You'll have to refer to your cooler manual. For me, mine didn't. So I got to clean because I took my cooler off for this demonstration. I'll have to clean my cooler off. But I got some thermal paste here. So you'll know. Let's see, I got to pull my cap off. Okay, there we go. Now, for thermal paste, you don't have to use that much. A lot of people think they have to put a godly amount. You don't. Just put some just about the size of a pea, which that there should be about enough, and put it right in the middle. Maybe a little bit more. Let's see. Right about that much. Then there. There it is. Okay, just like that. Just about that much, which you see I don't have nothing really to compare on size right yet, but believe me, that's about the size of a pea, like a green pea. You do not have to smush it down or spread it out, which some manufacturers, they'll tell you to do it. You won't have to. Now I gotta clean my cooler off. Then it's about the time I gotta stop my video. So I'm gonna try to get this cleaned off. It's the old Haswell socket 1150, 1155, 1156, 1151 copper core stock cooler, which is the better one, because there's aluminum and there's a copper. This is the copper one. It's the better one. Okay, now this here applies to this model cooler. Your cooler, you'll have to check and see the instructions to install it, because every cooler is going to be different. But your new Intel coolers are going to be almost the same way. Just make sure, this is for Intel, I don't have AMD stuff, and so sorry I can't help you with AMD. Make sure they're all turned to the left. Place it down on there like so. Make sure your holes align up. There, 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 there. Then you got to take and turn them to the right. Turn the right to the right to the right. Then click corner number 1. Click, click. Click, click. Click, click. And click, click. And your cooler is installed. Now you probably noticed that this is a different motherboard now. This is my old one, it's a Gigabyte, and it's an older motherboard, which I'm swapping out for my Haswell. I gotta take and remove the RAM. Now some RAM is on the motherboards is different than others. Some of them has 2 latches, which is like this, and some of them only has 1. So you gotta look at your slots and find out. This one here's got 2, so how you remove it is just there, which I'm going to remove all this RAM because I got to stick it over on my other one. So there. Take these sticks out. I'm just going to lay them aside. So there's 1, there's 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Now let me show you how these latches work. Now some motherboards, like I said, has 1 set of latches and, well, one side's latches and the other one's not meant to move. How you'll know is just by looking at them. You can tell, like this one here and this side looks absolutely the same, and you can just press on them and they'll unlatch. That's one way you know, and the other way is just by looking at them. It's just simply just, looking. Now, how to install RAM is pretty easy, which I gotta see which sticks I have, because I want to install 16 gigs of RAM in this. So this one's an 8. This one's a 4, so I don't want to install the 2 red ones. I want to install these. These are 8s, because this here is only a 4 gig stick of RAM. Let's see. Yeah, my video's out of focus. Video's out of focus a little bit. Yeah, it's fine. You'll believe me. It's 4 gigs, trust me. Okay. This here is 8. So, but one thing you have to do, grab your sticks, get them ready. Take your latches and open them up. So this one here was closed. Open them up. This one here, there's closed. Open them up. Okay, now if you look at the RAM slot, you'll notice that there's this piece right here in the middle. This is kind of important. But you notice on this side here is longer than this side. That's what you got to match up on your RAM. Because see, my RAM here, this is DDR3, DDR2, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5 is all the same on your slots, just they're spaced differently. Some of them might be harder than the other to judge, but you just look at your RAM, you'll know, and you just match it up. So mine, you just stick it right down in the slot like this, which, let me see, there. Make sure your latches are open before you stick your RAM in. Then you just push on a side and the latch will automatically close. That's how you know if you're pushing hard enough. It takes a good amount of force, so make sure you're on a hard, flat surface. So I'm just going to use my leg, make sure it's flat here, which is not recommended. What I'm doing here, just do as I say, not as I do. But preferably use a table or something hard and flat. Not recommended to do carpet. That's why I'm kind of using my leg or something like that, because of static buildup. But, okay, now let's push. Did you hear the click? Okay, now I pushed on it pretty hard, enough to where I left an indent in my finger, but that's how you'll know. on that side. So that side there latched because it closed itself, as you just seen in the video, and you heard the audible click. Now we got to do the other side. There it is. Then we got to do the other one. So we just got to put you in there. Let's see, like this here. And whoops, there we go. Make sure the latches are open. There's that latch open. This latch here's open. Push there. And push right about there. There it is. Just that easy. RAM's installed. Now, to get this in that. Well, it was just now brought to my attention when I was looking at this hardware that's left over that I forgot to show you how to install the I/O shield. Well, you have your I/O shield. This is just in case you have one. If not, you can skip this whole section. My light just turned off. But if you look at the I/O shield, you have to make sure your orientation's right. So what you'll have to do, you have to look at your motherboard, match it up, kind of match it up so it goes in this way, okay? Which I already knew. Then you'll have to also look at the grooves around it, which you see how mine has a lip on this side over here and not over here. Okay, it's kind of hard doing this one-handed. So that I/O shield needs to go in the inside of the case and be pushed outwards instead of, some people think it's got to be pushed over here. No, it don't go that way. This is for the part to where if your case comes with an I/O shield, because there's some other boards that does. But what you do, you just stick it in there in that hole, and it just pushes in place. Now it might be hard, but it does latch. It does kind of latch in there, and it should stay in place. But mine, I'm not planning on putting it in there, but I'm just showing you how it goes. Let's see. But yeah, it goes just like that. And it just pushes in. And once you, how you know it's in there is if you look on the other side, you will kind of see the edge of it kind of extrude a little bit. Let me see if I can get it started real quick. Then we got to move on because the video is quite getting a little long. There we go. It latched. And there it is. Let's see. See, there it is. But that's just in case if you have an I/O shield, you need to install the I/O shield before you install the motherboard. Okay, well, if you've been following along all this time, it's time to install the motherboard. We got the case completely prepped, and we have the motherboard laying right here. So we grab the motherboard. Mine does not have a I/O shield on it, which I bought this motherboard used. I'm not planning on playing games or anything like that on it. It's going to be in a workshop environment, so it really isn't going to matter. So if this computer ever blows up or anything like that, I'll just take it and replace it with something else that's dirt cheap. That one there was just too slow, and you couldn't upgrade it enough to match this here. That there was old AMD FX, and this is Haswell. So Haswell's got a lot more spunk to it than what that one there's got. But anyway, grab the motherboard and swing it in here without trying to scratch it, because you gotta be careful because you can scratch the board by the back of those. So you gotta kind of swing it in, line up the holes, your holes on here. So you gotta kind of line it up there and there. Line up your other holes, which you're going to have there there and there. So they're all lined up. Now, for the time being, I'm only going to install 2 screws. But I recommend to install them all if possible, if you can get to them. I highly recommend it. So we're going to install. I'm going to install one here. And which I used. Whoops. I moved my phone and stopped the video by accident, but press the button, stopped it. Phillips head screw. Then I gotta reach down here, grab another screw, and I'm gonna actually install it right. Ah, darn it. Where'd that screw go? Right there. Okay, let's see, right. It's kind of difficult. Some of these screws is very hard to put in when you're only dealing with one hand. Tedious little guy. My light shut off, but sorry about that. Now the motherboard is installed. Just finish installing the other screws. If you would, you'll have one up here, one over there in the corner, one there, so on. Just make sure your motherboard's fastened down really well. Then when you go to grab your graphics card, with this one here won't have a graphics card, you'll have to punch out these here. And how you do, you just take them and wiggle them back and forth. You'll have to push them out and in, kind of wiggle them back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until they break completely off. Then you'll have your graphics card. Make sure, and you install your graphics card, make sure this little flap here is open. This is the slot in which your graphics card will go in. Do not put them down here in this one here, because the top one, always the one that's closest to your CPU, is what is the high performance one. So as you go down the ladder, you will possibly lose what's called PCIe lanes, which is something that I'm not going to explain in depth in this video, because this is a dumbified version how to build a computer. Just trust me, put it in the topmost slot that the card will go in. And for this one, it'll be the yellow one. I don't have a graphics card because this computer here is going to be using the iGPU, because I'm not going to be planning on playing games or anything like that. It's going to be in a work environment. But make sure your slot is open if you have this style. Some of them is a flap open style, which you push up. Which if it's a push up style, it won't matter because they'll self do it itself. But on this one here, this style, you have to make sure it's open. Make sure you punch out the appropriate slots, your pieces of metal for your case. Then when you install your graphics card, it should slide in, push all the way down in, and it should latch. This one here will flip up. Then you'll have your screws up here. You'll have maybe 1, 2, or 3 screws, depending if you got a single slot, dual slot, triple slot, or quad slot graphics card. And it'll slide right down in. Then you just screw it in place. Or some of them has screws on the outside. Some of them has a bracket on the outside. Some of them has a twist and push in like latching mechanism. You'll have to look at your latching mechanism, but most of your cases use a screw type. And as you can look close, which in my video, it's kind of hard to see because my flashlight went dead. You can see this one here. It's got already a punched out bracket. One of these has already been punched out. It's just got a cover over it. But there's a screw there holding the bracket in place. There. So that's how your screws go in. So now the motherboard is installed. Now we move on to another fun part, the cables. Oh, before I continue on to installing the cables, if you got any drives such as an SSD, which I have an SSD here. This is an SSD or a hard drive. Install it now, which the hard drive, some of them will screw onto the case. Some of them has a slot like this one here does. This one here actually has a slot where you just take the hard drive and slide it into the slot. Some of them will have a bracket. Just make sure that the drive is mounted onto the bracket and can slide in, and you can access the connectors. All right. But this section here is for cables. I don't have the brackets or anything like that, so we're going to skip that part. My SSD is just going to lay in the inside of this little box here because I don't have no brackets at all. I could always screw it to this here was labeled SD, but when I go to swap it out with something else, because I've had drives mess up or had to use the drive for different purposes or plug it in to something else to pull data off or whatever, it kind of makes it hard, so I just leave this drive here. I'm going to lay it in there for now. Okay, first cable, you want to look at the cables. Your CPU cable connector, your power connector, and for your fan. Let me lay this here if I can. This is Intel, so whoops, come on now. Okay, quit being difficult. Quit being difficult. Darn it. Bloopers. Nope. Alright. Fine. Okay, imaginary friend, can you hold this for me? Sure can. Alright. That ain't gonna work. Alright. Well, fine. I'll do it this way. My light on my flashlight, my cell phone, is gonna work. Alright. Now, my fan header needs to plug in to right here, which if you look up there, which above my RAM, which you can't see it, it'll say CPU _ fan on that connector, but it's on the other side of my RAM, which is up here. You can't hardly see it, but that connector needs to plug in there because this one here being Intel, it has to be there. So I got to take the cable out of this bracket, run it around. Now on your fan connectors, it does matter. If you look at the fan connector, you have your flat side, which is, if you look on the one side, you'll have pins. Then you'll have the other side, which is that type. And if you look at the connector, which, let me find one, right here above the USB header, right here. Okay, this one here, that top one, not the bottom one, but the top one. If you look close, you can see a little black piece on the top of these 4 pins. See the 4 pins? Right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see a little black flap. That flap aligns up with that connector. Now, sometimes on fans, you'll have a 4-port and only have a 3-pin connector. It doesn't matter, just as long as this little piece right here where the 2 things come up, these 2 little snaps, I don't know what you would call them, but yeah, you know what I mean. Them there, they just got to line up with that. So if you have a 3-pin fan and a 4-pin connector, you'll just have 1 pin. It's not going to be used. It's not going to be covered up with anything. It's going to be fine. So let me take this here, rotate it around, grab my cable, plug it in right there, which is kind of difficult for me to do one-handed, but there it is. And there it is. My flashlight's getting dim. Dang. Going. Okay. Have to get me some brighter. See? It is installed. Now, let's move on to the other cables. Now, the next one we install is our 20 plus 4 connector, or 24. Now mine is a 20, which you see all the black, it's 20. Then it has a 4. Some power supplies, this here is removable. And what this is, this slides this way on, like towards my hand. Alright, onto the connector. Or you can plug this one in first, then this one. Alright? And what you have to do, you have to look at the connector. You'll have a little flap piece here on your connector. That here, your little clasp, needs to go onto that. A lot of mistakes people make is they just stick it on and it's just like that. That's not correct. It's got to actually latch. If you can grab that cable and do that, that is not correct. It's actually got to be pushed on. Now mine, it's already on here, but if yours has the 4-pin that's separate, you can, and it will not hurt, which is better, to plug in your 4-pin first into your slot. Just make sure you got it right. Your 4-pin always goes on the left side like this. Hold it just like this. This over here is my left. This here will always go on the left-hand side. Make sure those little pieces there, because you'll have those little tabs that attaches onto your black connector. Make sure this is in the direction of where the connector goes. So, plugs in just like so. Goes in the connector just like this, and you push down, and it should latch. There's the click. Some of them will click and some of them won't. But how you'll know is if you look closely, which I don't have a good enough light. So sorry that I don't not have a good light. Make sure it's down on there. You do not see no gap. So that one there is installed correctly. No gap. So now on to the CPU connector. Now on your cables, I gotta pay attention to my time. A lot of your cables are labeled. This one here is PCIe. That is GPU. That will plug into your GPU. I do not have a GPU, so this one here I'm gonna put aside. That one here I do not need. This one here can be, it's either or, it doesn't matter because it's not labeled. This can be either a CPU or GPU. But for this here, I'm going to use it for CPU. This here is got a 4-pin here and a 8-pin here. Now some of them does have a CPU connector, which this one power supply does not. So this one here is going to be your CPU. You can either plug in the 4 or the 8 to this 4-pin header. Mine's a 4. You also, like it's the rule of thumb with the other connectors, you got to also pay attention on your direction of your latch. Mine is at the top on the latch. Let me get a better pause the video. And we are back. Now let's see. As you can see on this here, I got me a better flashlight, better light hopefully. But as you can see on this connector here, the latch is at the top. So that means on my power connector, it's got to be placed at the top. So I'm going to use this 4-pin because it matches up. And reach it around here and plug it into that. Then this cable here, I'll just tuck it away for now. So I'm going to sit here and take it and tuck it here so it's out of the way. Then I'll zip tie it later. Now some people will take your cables and run them through your holes on, because that's what these are for, which I'm not going to. You have holes in your case. Here, 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 where you can take your other side panel off, then run your cables through the holes and up around so that you don't have all this nightmarish mess. For me, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Function over fashion at this point. I'm just basically just trying to get the PC working at this point to where it's usable. Then later on, as you get better, you can always tidy it up more. So this connector is in, it is installed. There is no gaps. It's completely installed. Power connector is installed. Now I need to install the SSD or hard drive. Now on an SSD or hard drive, doesn't matter, they're the same thing, you'll have two connectors. You have a small one and you have a big one. The small one is your data connector. Your big one is your power connector. So on your power supply, it does not matter. It does not matter. Just basically just got to grab one. These are called SATA power. Does not matter because as you can see, they're bridged together right here. See? Cable comes out of the power supply, goes up, goes in the one, then comes out and goes into the other. It really does not matter. For me, I'm just going to plug it into this one right here. Your orientation does matter. See? Got a little thing on it right over here to make sure it goes in one direction. Plugs right into the big one. So right here, let's see, just like this, like that. Then it slides right on just like that. Okay, now it's receiving power. Now you also need a SATA cable. This is SATA data. Now on the cables, this one here is labeled, which it does not matter. It does not matter at all. This one here is labeled for some crazy reason, drive and system board, but it does not matter at all. But it does, the connector there plugs into here. Let's see, it's kind of hard to do with one hand, but it plugs in, kind of latches and clicks. There you go. Now some of these has a little metal tab on them, so if you go to remove it, you have to push in on that tab so you can unplug it. So make note if yours has that or not. You do not have to push it in to plug it in. You only have to push that tab in to pull the cable out. But like I said earlier in the video, I'm just going to cram this in there. And for an SSD, there's nothing in the drive to short out. There's nothing in an SSD to get damaged by rattling around or anything like that. I'm just going to lay my SSD in there for the time being. Now on the other end, this on some boards does matter. So you have to refer to your manual to find out which connector matters. All right, because on some other boards, your SATA ports, some of them is disabled if you have a M.2, which are M.2, this board does not have one, which are M.2, some of them will be up here, some of them will be between the drives, some of them will be here, some of them will be down here. If you got a full ATX, this is not a full ATX, this is a little bit smaller motherboard than ATX. That's not important at this point. How your M.2 goes in, you have to take out your cover off if yours has a cover, because some of them does. If you're got one of the fancier boards, you take the cover off, then you'll have a slot that goes in sideways. What you have to do, you have to take your M.2, which let me refer this. Let's pretend for a minute that this is an M.2 for the moment, which I know it's RAM, but that's not the point. But what you do, you'll have your connector, and you'll have your connector on your motherboard. What it does, it goes in, and it kind of goes in a ramp style. It kind of slots in. Then once it's in, you got to kind of push down on it, hold it down, because it will spring back up. It will spring up, but you got to hold it down. Make sure your connector is all the way in. If not, you got to raise it up, slide it in more, push down. Your hole for where you go to line your M.2 up should line up with the M.2. Then you take your M.2 screw and you screw it down to your motherboard. Now, your M.2 might have a standoff, just like your motherboard, all right, where you had to install your motherboard. Some of your M.2s do not screw down onto your motherboard because you'll cause the M.2 to bend. And that's not good because you'll put a lot of stress on your connector and the M.2. So you might have to look and see if yours has a standoff in your parts that comes with your motherboard. This one here, like I said, does not have an M.2 or anything like that. So, but some of them will have the M.2 already screwed in. Some of them won't. Some of them will have it in a little baggie or whatever. But you'll have to take your standoff and move it to the correct position that needs to be for your connector that goes onto your motherboard. So goes on, goes in, line it up, make sure, take your standoff, move it to where it needs to be, put it in, push down, hold it, screw that little screw in, and your M.2 is installed. And if you have that metal cover, put your metal cover back on, screw it down, M.2 is installed. Now your M.2, for the best performance, goes in the topmost slot. But refer to your manual, because some motherboards, depending on which CPU you got, your M.2 will not work in that slot if you have a certain model CPU. So you might have to take the M.2 and move it to another slot. That will work. So refer to your manual. And also, if you're pairing your M.2 with a hard drive or a SATA drive, refer to your manual and find out which port is disabled, because your M.2s will disable certain ports because it uses the same connection to your chips on your motherboard, which there's other terms. It's called chipset and CPU and yada yada yada, but downloaded version. So you have to make sure that you've got your hard drive plugged into the correct port. And how you'll know which one is your ports will be labeled. Like this one here is SATA 1, SATA 2, SATA 3 and 4, which I'm going to take my SSD now while I got it. The other end and plug it in to connector. Now on your board, this you'll notice this one here has got two different collars. This is an older board, so most likely yours will be all the same, so it doesn't matter. This has SATA 3 and SATA 6. I want to plug my SSD into the SATA 6 connection because it's faster. So I want to plug it into this one. Alrighty, now my fan, I'll plug them in later. Okay, this here I said no to fans. Okay, we have one fan connector here, and my other fan connector is right here. So I got to take my fans. I'll set this down for 1 second because this is where I need both hands. This is called this connector is called a Molex. You have your one type of Molex, and this here is not typically on Molex connectors. This is if you want to plug and daisy chain your fans together, like this, to share one power connector, which for me I'm not going to do because I find that not very reliable. These connectors here can be very, very, very difficult to plug in for the first time because orientation does matter, which here's the cable coming out of your power supply, which will always have this type of connection, will always look just like this. Then you have your power supply connection. These pins are known to push themselves out. The ones on your power supply is also known to push themselves out. So as you push the connector together, pay attention to your cables. Alright? Pay attention to your cables so that you know that all four of the connections go together. So make sure your orientation's right. As you can see, my orientation is right because you can see kind of resembles a roof of a house versus this side here's longer than this side. So they doing just like this. Now you got to push kind of hard on these to go together, to go in. So it's in there. My pins did not back out, so that's good. Now I'm going to grab my other fan connector and plug it into another Molex power, which is right here. So I'm going to take this here, turn it around, plug it in there. Now it's not plugging in because that one pin right there is not lining up. If it does that, kind of wiggle it and kind of line the pins up like this. Kind of do this number, kind of work it a little bit to get the pins in there. You'll feel it. There you go. That's out of the way. Some fans connectors will have power like this and a power that's like this. You do not need to plug both of them in. And since my board has a chassis fan connector, I'm going to just take this one here and just plug it into my motherboard here, if it will reach. If it will reach. I might have to, let's see. Yep. Let's see now. There we go. There's a lot of stress on that cable, which is not a big deal. I'll move it later on. It's fine. I'll take it and rearrange it later. Yeah, I'll arrange it later. Because of, yeah. But anyway, that is how you, okay, let's see. Now we need to do one more cable, which I gotta find it, which is right here, which is your front panel headers, which I got to find where they went. Oh, there they are. I'm gonna stop the video so we can do these now. These are going to be fun. Okay, and we're back to working on your front panel headers and your other cables that you're wondering about. Okay, now let's go. Now, one thing you will need if you take a picture of one connector, which is normally on the front part of your motherboard, either along this edge here or right up here along this edge. It won't be that far. It'll be no more than halfway down your motherboard. There'll be a connector with a bunch of words around it, and it will say things like HDD, LED, plus minus. It'll say PW, SW. It'll say PW LED. It'll have things like reset. It'll say various different things. That connector is important because that goes to your power button, your reset switch, your power light, and such things like that. So what you'll need to do is look close at the connector, which let me see if I can zoom in on that connector. On mine, let's see, right. Come on now. Nope, right there, okay. See, it says F panel, HDD, LED, reset, has your PWSW at the top. See PWRBTN, then power LED, then has plus or minus. Now the plus and minus is important, and the where that's at is important. Now the best option is to start at the opposite end of that one pin that's missing. So the bottom words stands for the bottom row. Now that word on the far left is HDD LED. So what we have to do, we have to look for the cable and find the one that says HDD LED. Okay, this one here is power LED. So both of those cables there goes to the power switch. So we're going to put that aside. This one here is reset switch. Okay. Then let's see. This one here is power switch HDD LED. Okay. Now if we look close at this connector, you have a plus and minus. The one on my right is positive and the one on the left is negative. And if you look on this connector, the positive is on the left. So we got to orientate this here to be on the left, and it plugs into the farthest left because that's where the word is. So we have to match up the word with the connector. Reset is next, and if you look, reset is directly beside of the hard drive. So that leaves this one pin there, the loaner. It does nothing. So that lone pin is not going to be hooked up. So the reset. So we got to find the cable that says reset. So now reset. This is reset switch. And what's nice about switches, it don't matter. So that's why it doesn't have a positive or negative on your switch. So I'm just going to plug the switch in, leaving that one pin. Now, the top row, we need to pay attention to where, okay, LED, okay, it says power, PWR LED. So we need to find the power LED. So we need to find not the power SW, because that's power switch, power LED, which is this one, power LED, and there should be two of them. Now one's for positive, one's for negative. Now, like I said, this matters. You can't just plug one in, then plug the other in because, you know, it ain't going to work. So we have to match it up on the connector down here. Power LED, if you look down here, the positive is on the left, so it goes on the farthest left. The positive on the farthest left, so it goes right there. Then the negative, according to the connector, on the board, the power LED goes right next to it. So you've got to take this one here and plug directly into it. It's kind of hard to see, but let's see, right there. Okay. Then, last but not least, we have two more pins, which is your power button. So we gotta go over here and find the one for your power switch, PWRSW. And as you can see, it does not have a positive or negative, and it's a switch, and a switch does not matter. So it goes on the last two. Make sure it goes onto the two pins and not on the one, just one of the pins and the other. This connector, if yours has it, make sure you don't plug anything on that. And also make sure you're plugging it into the correct header. The part that I plug these cables into, that is called a header. And just make sure that you plug the cables into the right header, which it will, like I said, around the header, it'll say front panel, and I have all those. So my power switch, my lights, and everything for my switch and everything is all connected. Now, you might have connections like this. You'll have maybe one that says USB, and maybe one that says HD audio. So, well, we got to look at our board and find the ones that says for audio and USB. Well, this one here, I'm going to plug in the USB one. Now, I have two USBs. I have this one here, not this long one. This is for a TPM module, which my motherboard won't not have one because it's too old of a motherboard, and I'm not planning on running Windows 11 or anything like that on it, or any new modern OS on it. Make sure your connector is in the right orientation. If you look, you got a missing pin on the connector, and you have a missing pin on your motherboard. Now, it does not matter which one of these you plug in. It just as long as it plugs into one of them. And if you do not plug this in, then your USBs on the front will not work. Now, the one I plugged in just now is the ones that goes to these black ones, which is USB 2.0. See, there's a 2.0 and there's a 2.0. Now, your 3.0 connector takes a much bigger connector, like this one. And it will have a connector that looks very similar to it, and then it'll be in a different area on the motherboard. Some of them's over here along the side, some of them's along the bottom, but mine is right up here. So make sure it's oriented right. It goes right there, and once you look, the connector somewhere on it will say USB 3.0, which mine is right there on the side, USB 3.0. And it plugs in just like this. Let's see if I can see it. Which this connector will not fit that, so mine is not compatible with that connector, so I won't not be using my USB 3.0 port because of a different type of connector, which is no big deal at all. I will have to buy an adapter to make my USB 3 work. So not a big deal. I'll take my cable, stick it aside, and get me an adapter to make that work. Now for audio, which I had a cable left over for audio, HD audio. Now you'll have to find one on your board. Might have to refer to your manual and find out which header goes to your audio. For me, on mine, it was AAFP. It's for audio. Make sure the pins line up, which mine will have a missing pin. On this connector, it'll also have a missing pin. That missing pin is so that you don't accidentally plug this into a USB header. Because this here and plugging into a USB header does not mix. You will mess something up. So make sure your audio is plugged into the appropriate port. Which this here I'm just going to plug in so the cable's out of the way. It don't have to be, because my front panel audio was not going to be used at all on my motherboard or my case, so it really is not going to matter. Now it's the time to, if you want to tidy up the case with some zip ties or some tie downs or what have you, is probably what you should do right now. But right now the computer is completely built and is ready to go. Only thing we have to do now is take the cables and make them all nice and tidy. But like I said on this here, I'm function over fashion, so I'm not building something to be nice and neat. I'm building something just to work for the moment. So I'm just going to cram all my cables just right there, which, if you don't mind getting judged, then be my guest. Cram it on the internet and yeah. But for now, this computer is completely built. Just, I got to install my side panel back on my case. This one here has my fan connector here, so I got to find fan connector and plug my fan here for my side panel into my case, power up the computer, and install Windows. And if you plug it in to power and turn it on, and if you get some kind of display, you did everything correctly. Just follow my video in my channel to install Windows. Need any help? Refer to Discord chat, which we're called R-Tech or Tech, to ask questions concerning the video. And if you have any questions, tell them that you watched this video and at a certain point you got stuck. Show them the point to where you got stuck, and we will help you out. This is Spyro. Hopefully the video helped you. Have a good one.